Okay, I'm going to hand to yourself, Michel, and I will bring up your slides.
Thank you, John, and then welcome everyone. My name is Michel Rives, and I'm acting as project manager for 2.5 years now for our IFC for tunneling project. Besides, I'm owning a consulting company that does BIM management for infrastructure project for 15 years now. First, I'd like, of course, to present my apologies to those for not being in a capacity to be physically present. But it's, of course, a pleasure for our team to be hosted today by the Canadian community here in Montréal, Quebec. And of course, I cannot miss the opportunity to say un grand bonjour à nos chers amis, cousins de Quebec. Before we start, allow me to thank sincerely our stakeholders who are funding our project since its inception. Thank you very much for your continued confidence, very much appreciated. For this one session, we have 6 speakers, 4 virtually and 2 in person. But of course, we present today the results achieved by a team made of 50 plus terrific people, very experienced in the 3 disciplines we cover: geotechnics, excavation and support, systems for tunnels operation. A team that is truly consensus-minded and who come from all over the world. At the past technical summits that we ran virtually in March 2022, we had a focus on the conceptual model for those 3 disciplines that our industry experts came up with, and which we expressed in UML language. Since then, we've polished it, and our IFC experts came up with an implementation model of this conceptual model into the IFC mechanics. And this as an extension of the IFC 4.3 schema that's been released back in August 2021, and that is now going through its ISO publication process. So this implementation model I was referring to is indeed the focus of this session today at the Montreal Technical Summit. We have an hour and a half, but we can probably extend a bit if need be, to convey to you a lot of information. And to start with, Hiro Masashima from Oyo Corporation in Japan and Jan Christian Thoren from the Ministry of Transportation Sweden, 2 key senior experts in our team, and your host today, will deliver a global update of our project before handing over to André Borrmann from the Technical University of Munich, our technical lead, and our IFC experts, Lars and Sergej, present here. I'll address you again at the end of the session, so to update you on our next steps for 2022-2023, as well as for the Q&A session. Hope you enjoyed the packed agenda. It's really packed. And Hiro, Jan Christian, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Michel. Okay. I'm Hiro Masashima of Oyo Corporation from Japan. I and Jan Christian Thoren jointly give you the update of the IfcTunnel project. Okay, next slide, please. This is the agenda of today at this session. So after my update, André give us the development process of IfcTunnel project. Then Lars give us the explanation about the conceptual model that we worked very hard since the last summit. Then André give us explanation about the new schema and entities such as guided sweeps and voxel model. Then Sergej talk about HTML doc and GitHub issue management. After we give you the update, then Michel talk about the next phase, that is the deployment phase. Then we have a Q&A time. Next, please. A little bit to talk about the whole scope of the infrastructure project. We started about 10 years ago, and IFC alignment is released as IFC 4.1 in 2017. After that, we worked with the IFC bridge, road, railway, and the port and waterways. After that, we integrated them and harmonized them and released the IFC 4.3. Okay, and that is now under the certification process of ISO. And now we are working with the IFC tunnel project. Okay, and after IFC tunnel project completed, I hope, and probably hope, IFC tunnel also integrated to next version of IFC 4 point something. Okay, next please. What is unique or important with the IFC tunnel is underground. So we have to excavate. Please go back to previous one. Yes. We have to excavate underground, regardless it is soft or hard. So underground is very important. And of course, for the other domains like bridge, tunnel, railway, port and waterways, everything, all infrastructure stands on the underground or foundation. So underground is important. And even more, and even the construction above surface, like IFC building, is also stands on the ground. So that is the subsurface or underground is so important. We are working with underground with tunnel project. Please, next. Okay, this is the list of our stakeholders. We have 55 participants now. That number is increased from 45 to 55. So since last summit, so this stakeholder include infrastructure owners and geotech, civil engineering, and system engineers, and the national regulatory agencies and the research bodies. And we are working closely with international associations like ITA, IAEG, and OGC, of course. And we are talking with new participants all over the world. For example, AASHTO, Federal Highway Administration of the United States. Next, please. Okay, now I talk about the scope of the project. We started with use cases. Tunnel project use cases cover the big wide range from site investigation stages, that is geotechnics, then design, analysis, and tendering, and construction and construction monitoring, then handover. So we located these 30 use cases and prioritized them. Red color indicates higher priority, and blue color indicates a little bit lower priority. Okay, now I talk about the geotechnics. So why we are working with geotechnics? Because geotechnics is not sufficiently covered in IFC nor ODC. But as I said, underground is very important for tunneling, and the unique thing is uncertainty. We don't know the details of the underground before the project, and this uncertainty raises the risk of the construction. So we categorize or classify the information into three categories. One is the factual data, second is the interpreted model, and the third one is the implication. So now we call it Book A, Book B, and Book C. And we are also working with existing standard organizations like OGC, Geoscience ML, and DIX of the United States, and AGC of the UK. Now I hand over to Jan's question.
Thank you. Yes. If you start the scope with the geotechnical issue on the rock mechanics from the last picture, going into the actual excavation and the tunnels, we can go to the next one. We first have the actual excavation that is defined in these pictures with the The first two pictures you can see actually where the rock is cut out. It is not exactly the same geometry, of course, as the actual build parts of the tunnel inside. So we have a theoretical rock excavation model, and we also have a factual or as-is excavated tunnel that depends on the geology and everything. So inside the tunnel there will be several definitions of this volume. We then go on to support. The tunnel is supported by partly reinforcing the rock, but also installing shotcrete layers and casting concrete within the tunnels. And then we have lining. In some of the tunnels we do lining, and that can be consistent lining on the whole tunnel scope, and or part of the tunnel, of course. And then we continue inside into the actual functions of the tunnel. Then we have the systems. It can be a railway tunnel or a roadway tunnel or a metro tunnel or something like even a walk tunnel, that you have equipments inside the tunnel depending on what type of tunnel it is and what type of information you need to be able to handle within the tunnel. You can go to the next one. Yeah, I think I need to stand like this because it's a little bit too small otherwise to see. Here you see the full scope of the inner lining and the structure. You can go up from the west, you can see the single segments and the keystones, or the inner lining in this type of TBM tunnels. We also covered the drill and blast or conventional tunneling, where we look into different types of objects that need to be covered in the model. Both the theoretical reinforcement, you can see the symbols for that one there. And also where we have all these installations, and also we have the cut and cover tunnels that is actually built directly from scratch. You don't you have the same type of lining, reinforcement systems, and those parts even in the cut and cover tunnel. We haven't got in so much in immersed tunnels. That is quite popular, but I think that most of the geometry will be the same. There might be some parts that we haven't covered so detailed about that. Yes, you can go to the next one. Here are some more pictures on the actual operation system, the different type of subsystem. Probably most of them will also be in housing and on the type of buildings, on the type of systems, but some of them might be a little bit unique. There are special ways of evacuating a tunnel or controlling, or the security aspect of the tunnels is quite important. You can go to the next one. And during this, when we took the requirements report, and during what we had a number of expert panels where we took in comments from the experts that we have been dealing with and discussed in the domain expert groups. So that have been handled during when we took up the requirements. So I think I will handle over to the next one. I think I had this one also before André. Here is a picture of the actual workflow that we have been working with in the phase 1, the requirements. We have refined the requirements. And then you can see the specification where actually the technical team come into the project more actively and develop all these documentation connected to the requirements report. Yes, I think that was all I had.
Yes, thank you.
André's time now?
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, actually I directly take on from here. So please, next slide. Yeah, so this is essentially more or less the same aspect, but now depicted slightly different. So this is the process of the IFC extension that we have implemented here. It's following the general principles of buildingSMART International regarding how IFC extensions should be performed. So we did this requirement analysis Jan Christian has just mentioned quite intensively together with our domain experts. You see it on the right-hand side, the lower part of the figure. This has resulted in these data sheets, in the data requirements tables that we have created, and then we took this as the basis to develop the conceptual model that you now see on the top within the IFC experts team in this project. And based on this conceptual model, we then created the actual IFC extension in terms of the schema. We will now validate this schema by means of implementations together with the implementers. And then after we have done this, there will be the final IFC extension, and then there will be the formal approval. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so the requirements analysis, we heard this already, was really an important step. And we have invested around 1.5 years into that because tunneling is really a huge field and it required lots of effort to capture everything. We have laid this down in this requirements analysis report that is available online. So you see the link on the lower part of the slide. It documents the use cases, the processes, typical processes in tunneling and tunnel design. It also talks about the data exchange scenarios, some general aspects like georeferencing, geometry alignment, and then very detailed descriptions of domain-specific items from the different fields, geotechnical systems, and excavation structures and lining. Next slide. Okay, so I will not repeat this extension development process. I think we have shown it already in the last summit. So we are now really in this position where we have done number 4. So we have created a draft IFC extension, and the next step will then be validation and creating the final IFC extension. Okay, so as I said, requirements analysis was a big aspect, and you can find this report on the requirements analysis online using this link, or you just Google for IfcTunnel requirements analysis report, and then you will directly find it. Okay, so what is in the report? On the one hand side, we talked in depth about geodetic coordinate reference systems. This is really important for tunneling because long tunnels are typically designed and constructed on the basis of geodetic coordinate reference systems. So these coordinate reference systems typically have distortions, and this is something what every person from geodesy knows, but typical people from other domains are not so much aware. So using these kind of models with distortions must be clearly marked as such, because otherwise there might be the risk of misinterpretations. So this is what we kind of demand in our analyzed requirement report, to have a clear and unambiguous definition of the coordinate reference system in use. We then have talked about the alignment, because for tunnels, of course, alignment is super important. We have the boring axis, we have the tunnel axis, which might diverge. Then we have also the transport alignment, a third kind of alignment, and all of them have a relationship among each other. But according to our analysis, it would be too complex to capture this relationship. Instead, we model these 3 alignments independent of each other. In any case, what has been defined in IFC 4.3 fulfills also the requirements of tunneling, so we will go ahead with the alignment that is there. Then we had an analysis of the geometry representations. As you might know, different use cases demand different geometry representations. So we have, for example, explicit geometry that is nice for visualization, design coordination, quantity takeoff, and other use cases. But then there are use cases where we need profiles and alignment. It's also very important. So any kind of sweep is really required for representing tunnels for certain use cases. And then we have other representations like some for structure analysis, others for fully parametric descriptions. So we brought this down on paper, which use case demands which kind of geometry, because this is then also the basis for extending the geometry where necessary. Spatial structure, everyone who knows IFC knows that spatial structure is really at the core of IFC. For buildings, in case of tunnels, we need quite flexible structure on different scales. We have the large, medium, small scale. So large scale is depicted here on the left-hand side, where you would have different sections of a very long tunnel. Imagine a tunnel of multiple dozens of kilometers. Then the section would have a couple of kilometers, for example, representing the different construction methods. Then the medium scale would be smaller sections, longitudinal sections, where we have different rock classes and different needs in terms of geotechnical support. Again, this would be typical spatial sections. And then we have also the other direction. So we also have longitudinal or lateral sections. So in this case that we see here, we see that the spaces are actually a lateral decomposition of the space. But we come back to this later on. We talked about geology already. So just a short repetition of this. So geology, of course, is super important for tunneling. At the same time, it's quite demanding for representing it in a model, because it has complex geometries. It has a large number of properties and additional information. So we decided to describe layers and discontinuities. We included hydrogeology, and what is also very important, that we have a clear separation between what we have said already, between the book A, book B, and book C, factual data, book A, interpreted models, book B, and then implications for design in book C. Here we worked intensively also with existing standards, like, for example, GeoSciML and other existing standards that we, of course, try to integrate into our efforts. So then we have the load-bearing structure, again, very important for tunnels. Here we have these three typical construction methods that we took into account, using a tunnel boring machine, also called mechanized tunneling. Then we have the drill and blast, also called conventional tunneling. And then we have cut and cover, a method that is usually used, for example, in cities for metro lines, etc. You see these different methods being depicted here in the three different parts of this slide. Okay, then we have the technical systems. That's also very typical for tunnels, that we have a lot of technical systems for ventilation, for fire protection, drainage, electricity, safety and evacuation, and communication. All that had to be analyzed and brought into the taxonomy analysis that we have performed. And this brings me exactly to this taxonomy analysis. So our three different domain expert groups, geotechnics, for systems, and for structures, they worked independently among them. Each of the three groups had 15 to 20 members. And then they compiled these spreadsheets that we see on the right-hand side, where we have the different, let's say, levels of decomposition. And then we have defined the individual elements, like, for example, in geotechnics, we have fault surface and fault zone. And then we worked on this, harmonized it, brought it in line with international standards, national classifications, and also object catalogs. So yeah, this was like the very first but important step. So we have done the requirements analysis report that you see on the left-hand side, and we have produced the taxonomy spreadsheets. And this now went into the UML model. We followed the UML modeling guidelines that have been set up in the infrastructure room a couple of years ago already. So we used this again, and we used a tool called Enterprise Architect to create the UML model, and we were able to produce a big UML report where we have now all the new entities that we propose being reflected in this UML model. And this was then also input for what we did with respect to the actual Express extension. This was handled on GitHub using IFC.doc and the IFC.doc configuration files. GitHub was used also for intense discussions among us and refinement of the schema extension. And from this, then the schema was created and the HTML documentation was created, which is now made available on the dedicated website where we ask the international community for feedback. And of course, we will do this entire cycle again and again because we are not yet there. It's not yet a final standard. It's still a draft standard that is under development. Okay, with this, I hand over to Lars, who will talk more in detail about the conceptual model, UML model that we have produced.
Thank you, André. So I guess you can flip slides for me.
Yes, I will. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I will talk a little bit about the conceptual model, and then following the process, Sergej will sort of continue after with the actual Express extension and the extension of the specification itself. So for the conceptual model, we use UML and this enterprise architect tool that André mentioned, and UML is this kind of standardized graphical or visual notation for, among other things, object-oriented data models, and well, that's what we have used it for. And based on the requirements analysis and the taxonomy spreadsheets, we created this model in, let's say, two parts. One part is where we actually in UML represent all the domain concepts from these taxonomies. And from that, we create sort of an IFC mapping. And the mapping in this sense means that we either try to find concepts in already existing in IFC that matches the concepts that our domain experts specified, or in some cases we need to actually invent new IFC concepts to be able to represent the stuff that comes from our domains. So we actually have this huge report that André mentioned is actually a couple of reports. We have one report each for these three domains: systems, excavation, and geology and geotechnics. And those three reports actually describe the parts, I mean the domain parts, including the proposed IFC mapping. And then we also have a pure sort of UML representation of our IFC extensions. And that is actually what I'm going to show you today. And also we have two more reports. One is a reading guide, so to help you read the UML diagrams. And also we have the modeling guidelines that were actually developed using or in the IFC infra and rail projects for IFC 4.3. So let's take the next slide then. So this is just not to go into too much detail. Since we used the modeling guidelines from the infra and railway rooms earlier work, we just continued in the same fashion. So hopefully that makes it easier to read the UML diagrams, since you have color codings and so on, so you can see what is a domain concept, what is an IFC concept, and also there are different types of IFC concepts like entities or predefined types or property sets and so on. And there are then color codings of these UML diagrams, so you can also visually see the difference. And also from the borders of these boxes in the diagrams, you can also see if if the entity or predefined type is proposed by us, or if it's modified, or if it's just used as is already in the schema. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through all the domain concepts and their mappings, because then we would have maybe 100 slides here, and we don't have time for that. So what I will do is go through the UML representation of the different extensions we have actually made to the IFC schema. And the IFC schema, you see sort of a really schematic representation of it to the right there. You essentially have the parts. You have a spatial structure, you have a functional structure, and you have physical components, and of course you have also basic resources like geometries and stuff like that. And so we sort of move between these sort of major parts of the IFC schema. So I will go through the spatial structure extensions, the functional structure extensions, and then components and resources. So I think we can take the next slide. So this is not maybe so easy to see, but first of all, we have in the spatial structure, as many of you might know, yes, thank you. We have things like previously in already IFC 2x3 or IFC 4, we have had sites, and we have had buildings, building stories, and spaces, and then from, I think, IFC bridge or something, IFC facility was introduced, and IFC facility then is in IFC 4.3 used for buildings, bridges, railways, marine facilities, and roads. And for tunnel, then we also added an IFC tunnel facility. And also for the IFC tunnel facility, we have added a number of then predefined types using the sort of usual IFC mechanism for further typing of entities. So you have access tunnels, shafts, utilities tunnels, railway, road, pedestrian, metro, bicycle, bypass, maintenance, underground facilities, and ramp. So that's the predefined types for IFC tunnel then that we have in our current proposal. So maybe next slide. So if we go sort of further down into the spatial structure elements, we also have then the facility part. And in the same fashion as in IFC 4.3, we have road parts and railway parts, bridge part, marine parts, and so on. We also now added tunnel parts. And also the tunnel part entity has a couple of predefined types: tunnel section, crossway, ring section, and portal in the current proposal. So this essentially means then that you can, for example, have a project with a site, and inside a site you could have a tunnel facility, and inside the tunnel facility you can break that down further into facility parts. So to structure the an IFC tunnel data set then. Okay, so I think we can go to next slide. Also, you saw on some earlier slides that you had quite an elaborate breakdown also in sort of laterally in a tunnel. So we actually decided to define these lateral sort of structures as spatial zones. And you see there are already spatial zones, of course, in IFC, and these with the red borders here are then types of zones we added. And some of these come from the excavation domain, such as invert and lining and service and so on. And some actually come from the geoscience domain, like mapped zone and tested zone, to be used for geoscience mapping purposes, actually. Yeah, I don't know if I should say anything more about this, but yeah, you see we have invert, lining, service, interior, installation, annular gap, clearance, compartments, mapped zones, and tested zones. So we actually added quite a few predefined types to IFC spatial zone. So from there we go into built elements. I mean, now we are talking sort of physical elements, things that are then contained in the spatial structure elements. We actually, I mean, I would say that the majority of domain concepts we actually could use what already exists within IFC. But we have added some things that I will show you. So for example, as subtypes of IFC built element, we have added a fill element, which comes from the excavation domain. We have added an arch element. There is already an element assembly in IFC for arches, which is sort of then an assembly, and this is more like for a unitary arch element. Yeah. If you scroll down a little bit, André, you see also the predefined types there. So fill element, currently we have annular gap fill and invert fill. So fill element is essentially an element that fills the gap between other elements. And to cover also requirements from the excavation support team, we also have a kind of plate, new kind of plate for lagging, and I'm not an expert at this, so maybe you'll have to ask the experts exactly what this is. So I think we take next slide. We have also added two types, predefined types for IFC element assembly, which is an existing thing. So we added a type for umbrella vault. Again, exactly what this is and how it is used, you might ask the domain experts, and also a duct bank, which is an element assembly, which came from the excavation team. Yeah, I think we can take the next slide. So systems, this systems in IFC sort of describe functional groupings of elements, and there's a difference between the spatial breakdown and the functional breakdown. Since a system breakdown, a single physical element can participate in many systems if it sort of performs many different functions. And we felt that this was a good way to represent sort of the instead of creating lots of additional entities based on sort of a system breakdown, we instead added a couple of more built systems and distribution systems, and then you are able to use a lot already existing entities in IFC and just group them into these systems to sort of indicate what function they serve. So we have actually then added built systems for tunnel pre-support, tunnel support, tunnel lining, waterproofing, and fire protection. And there was actually a fire protection system as a distribution system before in IFC 4.3, which actually was described as a sprinkler system. So we actually make a distinction between active and passive fire protection. So active fire protection is sort of putting out fire. So there you have the distribution system type fire protection, and then the passive fire protection is more for preventing fire to spread and so on. So we also have this built system fire protection for this passive type. Yeah, so maybe next slide. Again, a lot of classes. This is then for earthworks and excavation, and some parts exist from IFC 4.3 and some parts we sort of added to the structure. So for example, earthworks fill is an entity from IFC 4.3. There was an entity called IFC reinforced soil in IFC 4.3, and we actually proposed to generalize the name of that a little bit to IFC improved ground. So it's not just soil that is considered. You could also consider improving the ground when it's not soil but rock rather. So we proposed to change the name there, and we added a few predefined types also for that, like deep mixed, frozen, and laterally drained. So a couple of new types to the already existing that were existing already for reinforced soil. And then we have added the ground reinforcement elements in parallel, where you have currently rock support bolts and spiling bolts. And then regarding excavation, in IFC 4.3, you have IFC earthworks cut, but for tunneling, we discussing with the excavation experts, we saw the need to actually differentiate between earthworks cut, which represent more like an open excavation, and then a specific entity for underground excavations. And to still keep this together, we added actually an abstract supertype for these two, which we call then IFC excavation. So either you have these open excavations, which then are earthworks cuts, and you have underground excavations, which we added now for tunneling as well then. Yeah, a lot of information here, but yeah. If we go to the geoscience, the geology and geotechnics, you heard earlier these Book A, Book B, and Book C. Book A about the factual data, and this essentially is represented in our schema proposal as observations, which can be either observations of their own right, or it could be observations that you, for example, connect to an IFC borehole or an IFC sensor, or maybe something else. So, and then of course you have different types of observations for geoscience. And as you see also, we have actually added this generic observation entity. So it could be sort of expanded in the future if other domains maybe see a need also to record observations in an IFC dataset. Yeah, so that was Book A. Yeah, also Book A for IFC borehole, which actually existed already in IFC 4.3. We have added a couple of predefined types which did not exist before. So we differentiate between core drilling, destructive drilling, and trial pits. Yeah. So Book B is that's then the interpretations of the factual data. We have essentially two entities, and one is a geoscience model, which you can view as an assembly of geoscience features. And geoscience models and geoscience features, they are typed in quite a lot of detail due to our requirements from the geoscience team. So models, you have different types of models: a geotech model, a hydrogeo model, geology model, geohazard model, physical property distribution model, or a geotech synthesis model. And these models then can aggregate different features which are then interpreted features in the underground, and these features could be folds, bodies of different types, fluid bodies, void bodies, and also type of features that I can't explain to you, like piezometric water levels, discrete discontinuities, and contacts, and yeah. So this is actually to cover the needs of the Book B requirements then. So, and for Book C, which is the last part, we actually have, and I think this will be further generalized a little bit since our latest discussion, but in essence, what our domain experts wants to achieve is to describe these sort of longitudinal or linearly defined elements, which we then have called linear zone, to sort of have this analogy with a spatial structure, where you have spatial structure elements and you have spatial zones. So we view these as linear zones, and the idea is that you can represent different types of data linearly along the alignment, typically describing a from and a to along the alignment, and then describe things like the actual conditions and the different actions needed, like support actions and so on, using the same kind of linear sort of definition of the location of specific data. So you have this sort of schematic image to the right there, typically how this could work. So you could have, for example, a geotech typical section with some property sets connected to it that is described from and to chainage, and then, for example, you could have support sections, not necessarily using the same intervals of the alignment, not overlapping exactly, but you could still very easily then look at comparing these different types of data together using the chainages. I think maybe my time is up, but
Yeah, let's. It would be good to move on, I think, in the interest of time. If we could move to the next presenter, that would be great.
Yeah, I think we should.
So maybe I then come back to the geometry presentations, because they are always very important, because geometry is really the key of any model. So we had to make sure that the geometry representations that are provided by IFC are sufficient. And of course, they are extensive, and most of the use cases can already be covered very well. And well, in the extreme, we can, of course, represent all kinds of tunnels using many, many triangles. But well, this is a very memory-intensive description of geometry, and still it's not perfectly accurate. So this is why, for many, we need something else. Like, for example, we need to be able to sweep profiles along the alignment, also taking into account that the profiles may vary. There are existing entities for that. IFC sectioned solid horizontal, for example, and we analyzed this deeply. In the perfect sense, it would be nice to have these kind of guiding curves, and being able to combine the guiding curves with the profiles. We did a very intensive analysis in this regard. I came up with a number of proposals, but all of them seem a bit too complex for the implementers. So we decided to postpone the guided sweeps for now, and maybe this is something for future versions of IFC, because, well, at the end, only a limited set of use cases would require this kind of representation. But what is more important is the voxel representation. This is really something that is urgently required, because if you want to describe big areas, underground areas, to describe the soil conditions, for example, describing the underground with the different layers and the varying, spatially varying properties, then this kind of representation is really helpful, because with each and every voxel you can associate a certain value, so you can really describe these graded material properties in a very fine manner. So we created a proposal to describe these voxel representations. I will not go into too much detail here, but let me say that we have this new subtype of IFC product representation item, which is IFC voxel grid. It's a subtype of solid model. I will go into detail about the structure in a second. But then on the other hand side, we also have what we call complementary data as a new subtype of IFC product. And this can be voxel data. And then we have these 5 predefined types: integer voxel data, logical voxel data, vector voxel data, real and label voxel data, to describe the values in each and every of the voxel cells. So in the express schema, we will later come to express again, but you will then see that this is the express description: voxel size X, Y, Z, grid size X, Y, Z, and then a list of booleans describing where we have essentially a solid and where we do not have a solid. The data itself, I talked about this already. We have this kind of predefined subtypes where we hard code the type of data that we want to store there, because this really helps to later come up with a really thin representation of the data itself. So in the end, we will represent really just a large number of numbers, and these numbers are then associated directly with the individual cells. Yeah, and that's it from my side with respect to geometry, and I now hand over to Sergej for the actual schema extension.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen here. So, okay,
Is that the screen that you wanted to share, Sergej? Yep.
I guess.
The black one?
Yeah, the black one. Yeah, we've got that.
So, doing all this, of course, the end goal is to have an implementable standard. So there are a few conceptual steps that we have to take. And once those are done, we have to encode this into the proper structures to be able to exchange data. For this, we are using GitHub. We have this repository set up where we gather information, gather feedback, model the structures that are required, and then generate the documentation and the computer interpretable listings that are necessary to have this standard implemented. So this is a public repository, so anyone can pretty much collaborate and cooperate here. And what we do have is we have this repository where we are doing two things in parallel at the moment. We are accompanying the process of the ISO process. So we are bringing back all the changes from the ISO process that's still ongoing. so that we always have the the latest state. And we are also extending the specification with our requirements, and for that we are using two base branches. As the develop branch is the base branch, where we are merging the changes to the baseline, so 4.3. We are in parallel working on the tunnel branch. This is this branch, the tunnel branch, where we are gathering all the extensions by the tunnel project. So since we're on GitHub, we're trying to use all of the mechanisms available to us. We are gathering issues. So all of the issues can pretty much be filtered by projects. For example, IfcTunnel, we get all the issues. And we're also using the projects feature of GitHub. So our IfcTunnel project can be overviewed here, and you can see we have a backlog of currently 13 issues that are still in to do. We have 13 in progress, and we already have 74 issues closed and done. We will also keep using this this system in the deployment project. So at any point in time where there are changes requested by implementers, if there are usages we still have to add, and templates we still have to add, because we just modeled the framework for now. So at any point in time that we have a clear way of modeling a voxel grid, a clear usage, which entities have to be involved, and so on, this will be done through this system here. We can also create some express diagrams, like we did, for example, for georeferencing. As you can see, in georeferencing, we have a couple of new entities that we added. Of the existing ones, coordinate operation, coordinate reference system, map conversion were existing, but we also added rigid operation, map conversion, scaled IFC geographic CRS as and IFC well-known text as new entities to be able to model not just map georeferencing, but also geographic CRSs. It also enables us to model distorted, or let's say projected coordinates inside an IFC file, and have a clear differentiation between projected coordinates and local engineering coordinates. So what we're doing is we're gathering issues, we are assigning them to pull requests, and these are then merged. Just recently we merged, I'm just going to show you one as a demonstration. Just recently we merged georeferencing. This was a relatively big pull request with a lot of discussions going on. Many people have contributed. The discussion also went outside of the scope of this repository, so there is discussions all over the place. But we try to at least reference the discussions between themselves, so we have a clear let's say information and idea flow of how we got to the solution that we that I showed over here. And if we look for the closed pull request, I'm sorry, my internet is giving up on me here. But we will manage. So it was this feature georeferencing pull request, and the real, let's say, benefit of using such a system is that we can have discussions right on the particular change that we want to implement. So let's say on something like rigid operation, we can go to the actual entity, to the actual entity definition here, and we can just click on the part that we want to change or that we want to discuss, and leave a comment here and start a review and so on. If I show you some existing, let's say, discussions here, we have let's say the name change over here that was submitted immediately, and it can be reviewed and discussed on the actual line. So if I wanted to answer here, I could say, for example, and just add a single comment here, and that's how the process would be. So one thing that's really nice here also is that whenever a pull request is merged, the appropriately referenced issue is closed, and we get a clear process where the issues are getting less and less, and because they get automatically closed by whenever they are done in a pull request. So this is the process. But then, of course, we also want to share our work with the public, and we realize that this might not be the best way. It is a good way because you can talk about issues immediately, but for a more broad review, we also generate periodically this documentation where we have a change log. And if you go to the change log from 4x3 to 4x4 and click on entities, because this is what we were currently focusing on, we haven't worked on properties, quantities, or concept templates yet, and usages. This will come with the deployment process. You can then review all of our changes and sort of have a categorized change that was done to certain entities. Changes to IFC kernel and product extension or specifically kernel is a lot connected to the ISO process. So these are not that interesting, but we do have in product extension already starting the new build system types. As you see, these are tunnel specific. Then if we go to element assembly, we have the added types, and at any point in time, of course, you can just click on the definition, and you can see the change log of how IFC element assembly type enum was changing, and you can also go directly into the definitions over here and review this in a typical manner as documentation is generated. As you can see, all of the changes that we were talking about are here. We have complementary data with the strongly typed data types for voxel, integer data, label, linear, sorry, I didn't mean that, logical, real, and vector for voxel data. We also have the linear zone that was added and Lars talked about before. You can go into here and you can see the documentation for linear zone. You can also see that it was added in 4x3 to 4x4. And you have all the inheritance structures over here. Of course, there's no definitions yet. Like I said, we are still working on the implementation part of the standard, which will be finalized in the deployment project, but that's a work in progress, and this will be updated into this documentation. You can also see that we have given it a draft notation, so that's like the first level of standard development and building smart, and this will be changing in the progress of standard development. Next year we should have a candidate standard. Going on, you can see that all of the sub-schemas are also listed, so where these objects are grouped inside the IFC specification, and you can pretty much find all of the changes like boreholes that were previously mentioned. So let's say, for example, the predefined type apparently was added on borehole. Let me just quickly jump in here. Obviously, this was added in our move from 4x3 to 4x4. Earthworks cut, for example, the predefined here was modified. It was changed to optional. We have elements like geoscience elements, geoscience model, and so on. Geoscience feature, which were sort of added with solid stratum and all of the geotechnical elements that were added by ports and waterways in mind, but those were deemed insufficient. So we're currently in the process of testing and evaluating whether or not these newly added geoscience elements are good enough, let's say, to also model the stratums. And if that will be the case, we are thinking of deprecating the older stratum elements, which are currently also not very thoroughly documented and don't have any usages again, so that there's no really agreed way of using them. So in the end, we're quite confident that we can do it with geoscience feature, but it will require some rigorous testing here. Going on, you can see that we also added things to the electrical and HVAC domains, like fan type, jet, siren, beacon, and so on. So certain devices and appliances that were missing. Some of the changes are still changes from the ISO process. And then we come to the IFC tunnel domain, which is slowly growing, and the tunnel typical section is sort of getting its way into these definitions. We just had an issue that we talked about today. You can see the tunnel typical section is something that's still active. It's going to be inserted into the tunnel domain. And then going further down, we also added some stuff to resources. So we're not just, adding the tunnel domains. We're also adding some resources which will be possible to use by other domains, like well-known text literal, voxels, of course, dataset references, which were not available, only document references were available, and so on. And then we have some property changes. These are again connected to the ISO process. And then we get to our representation resource, where we added the new entities to model georeferencing, the geographic CRS map conversion. This addition of scale Y and Z was done in 4.3, but now it was removed and in favor of map conversion scaled. So map conversion scaled is now supposed to be used for scaled conversions. a couple of other things, well-known text and rigid operation that were also added, and the projected CRS was modified a bit. But this all will be thoroughly tested in our deployment project. So this is sort of the current scope of the changes. This is the baseline with which we are going to the deployment project. Like I said, this is still a draft, so bound to change, but everyone welcome, of course, to review and give us feedback on GitHub, where we will be going through the issues and trying, of course, to at least have a discussion, if not immediately implement them if we deem them necessary. Okay, with this, I would also pass the torch
To Michel, right?
Correct.
Michel, should I show you the slides or will you do?
You have my slides, André?
Yes.
Okay, if you wish, please. So I hope this doesn't look too esoteric, but of course we've moved from discussions around concepts to how to implement, and we need technical means for this. And as you've realized, we are lucky enough to be in a capacity to base our work on an existing very rich IFC mechanic, which structures the way to format data in different level. Of course, you have low level layers, and you have more domain and user specific layers. So we respect this, but we benefit from this as well. And when it comes to the next steps, we are putting in place a so-called deployment program, which basically has two objectives. One is to provide technical support to software developers, and the other one is to validate the schema, as Sergej has mentioned earlier on. So it's really a set of iterative loops that we are going to be having together with the software vendors that we would like to invite. But lucky us, I need to mention that we had as well, from the very beginning of our project, software developers on board, like the Leapfrog team, for example, or the NovaPoint team. And of course, the thinking that we've been having and under their influence has been as well to think about, the easiest way to implement. And that has been a positive concern that we took into consideration when, for example, the UML model was based, and then, of course, when it comes to the schema, the XML schema itself. So just to say that we feel we are in a rather good position to now engage deeper discussions with software vendors. And when I say software vendors, actually, I should be more general than this. It's, of course, those of you who release commercial software, authoring tools, for example, but as well those who deal with providing database management solutions, as well as others providing libraries, for example. So as part of the BSI community, we have key actors like Geometry Gym, ODA, RDF, but we could think as well of those we may not be that close to us today, like software or Unity 3D or the Rhino solutions. And on top of these, we should as well invite those who integrate solutions, for example, those who integrate PLM solutions, assets management solution, or GIS. And there is a link with that community that we need to make, because of course we aim at optimizing and easing data exchange when it comes to underground design, but likewise when it comes to underground constructions. So those, for example, dealing with machine guidance should be part of the game. And when we talk about handing over data to assets management, then we need to be talking to those who integrate assets management systems. So the community of those concerned by what we've done is rather large, and we should shoot for having representatives of those different profiles. Next to this, and I think this is an expectation as well on behalf of software developers, provide means to check the IFC files that are being created through this upcoming IFC 4.4, and we can think of people like the AK Solution Software, AK Systems, our friends at IFC OpenShelf, or the hardcore solution THC that is now popping up on the market. Likewise, BIM viewing tools, we should have these people consider what we've been doing as well, and likewise those providing collaboration platforms. There are many of these. Just maybe the next slide, André, if you wish.
Yes.
And trying to structure a bit the development program itself, we are thinking of helping with realizing low-level unit tests. So that's really towards helping developers implement low-level software functions, and of course that concerns the domain objects, but as well the lower layer features like anything that relates to geometries and geometries extensions that we are providing. And the second type of test would be more end-user oriented for testing exchange that are relevant by themselves, so self-sufficient exchange. And these we believe we can create them by expanding from the use cases that we had created as part of the requirements document that André has detailed earlier on. And of course, there you find exchange in the form of export to this rich format, or import this rich format, or import-export. As far as the technical means that we intend to provide software developers, there is of course this idea of helping how to use what's there, and that's the how to usage documentation. Provide as well example of code that can be copy-paste by software developers within their own import-export package. So they speed up in a sense the creation of those exchange formats, as well as providing examples by IFC files, and by this I mean IFC 4.4 files. We think as well of providing probably NDA protected DLLs to help software vendors there too, and potentially a testing platform. So again, to be in a capacity by oneself to test what has been produced as far as this IFC 4.4 format is concerned. We think in terms of software certification as well, to make it as lean, as simple as possible for software vendors to get their software certified through the use of MVDs, but then would be 3 of them probably, one dedicated to geotechnics, another one dedicated more to the structural aspect of things, and the last one to systems. But these would include, of course, what is in common, and that makes sense in the 3 disciplines. But the idea would be to create sort of a subset specifications from the alignment-based reference view, and or the reference view itself, if alignment in some cases is not making sense for the purpose of the certification. So we would, in a sense, not exclude these who do not support alignment definition. And of course, the test instructions to help software developers prepare for the prepare to apply for the certification itself. And along these lines, André, if you wish. So basically, just to report to you the fact that there is, of course, it's been reshuffled a bit, but there is a certification program that BSI runs that is being slightly updated and that we will benefit from. And the idea as well is once we go into this process, we will be in a capacity to rely upon the contacts we've established, for example, with ITA, the International Tunneling Association, the national colleagues of these, to relay the message that software, pieces of software from those vendors have been certified and do match the industry expectations. So, an effort on behalf of the software vendors, an effort on our behalf to promote, communicate, disseminate the information. I think that can lead us to a win-win situation. And in this little matrix here, ranked the software packages that our industry experts use today by disciplines, and including the ones that are a bit more transversals, like BIM collaboration platform. And in blue, you have the list of these teams that we've started having exchanged with, and we express interest. So it's of course it's rather wide a group of solutions and software vendors, but that reflects the complexity of the situation in projects, and we really aim at helping people to exchange information in a rich way by having those import-export abilities within these software packages. So the door is open. We would really like to have anyone interested contact us, and we'll get them on board. We plan on having an official communication around this deployment program by the beginning of November, so that's more or less tomorrow. It will probably last from now to till April, something like this. And as André and Lars and Sergej mentioned, this is a way to consolidate what we have and shooting to ease the implementation again. Being in Canada, Quebec today, we don't have any Canadian representatives, nor from infrastructure owners, nor from consultants, nor from general contractors. So again, the team is more than happy to welcome people of these profiles. Feel free to just contact us. This is we have a lot that we've done, of course, but refining things is something important, and that we will take care of. So again, feel free to join and contact us directly. Contact me, contact André, or any representative at the buildingSMART International New Region. We'll be happy to get you on board. And that was what I wanted to just outline as far as the next steps for 2022-2023. André, is there anything else you'd like to add that we may not have covered?
No, I maybe just thanks again to the team who has engaged a lot during the last 2 years, and we are really happy about this intermediate result that we have. A complete conceptual model, a first draft of the Express extension, and this is a good basis now for the deployment project, and we look forward to continue the whole work in this project.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michel, Lars, André, and Sergej. I think we're pretty much on time. Are there any final comments or thoughts from anybody before we close the session? No? Okay. Thanks very much, guys. See you again soon.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.